Hi, I'm M,
And my name is Bea.
and this is
Fangirls Anonymous. A quick warning, this podcast is not for kids.
We get into some pretty explicit stuff.
But if you're still with us and into that, welcome. Hello.
Hi, B, how's it going?
It is going pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm great. This episode's going to be pretty interesting, I think.
It's a little bit different from the last couple we've done.
It's very informative,
Mhm.
especially if you don't know anything about this, I'd say.
I don't think a lot of people do. It's kind of a behind the scenes thing.
Yeah, it feels like I'm like throwing a curtain back and being like, whoa, this is how people think about fic on like a structural level a little bit.
Mhm.
It's fun. What are we talking about?
We are talking about the Organization of Transformative Works project, the Open Doors project. The Organization of Transformative Works is the sort of ruling body that's in charge of AO3, and one of the other projects that they have going is Open Doors, which is it's sort of rescuing fic from disappearing into obscurity. It's essentially a project that the intent is to go out and find fic that is in danger of being lost and putting it on AO3 so that it's archived along with everything else in a consistent way that's easy to access.
I will say that we spoke about people losing their work in those mass deletion events on LiveJournal and fanfiction.net in our episode A Brief History of Online Fanfiction Platforms a while back. And basically the Open Doors project, Organization of Transformative Works, is trying really hard to make sure that those mass deletion events don't happen again. It's making sure that the orphan pieces of our history of fanfics, the pieces of history that we have in our fandoms and fanfiction sites and all that jazz, aren't lost forever. And I think we need to keep it all, but we will get into that.
It's not uncontroversial.
Like literally everything in fanfiction, yeah.
Yeah. So what this project primarily does is it goes to other fan places on the internet that are in danger of no longer being maintained or being taken down. So for example, if you're familiar with old school fandom and how every fandom had one or more sites that a fan made and maintained and curated works to put up, and it had its own specific formula and it very unique niche little sites that you had to go to read the fic, which nowadays we don't have as much because we've got the wonderful archive of our own, and we've got fanfiction.net and Wattpad and all these other centralized locations. So a lot of these sites are in danger of just sort of fading away because nobody knows about them anymore and nobody maintains them anymore. So the Open Doors project will go looking for these, and they will obtain permission from the site creators or moderators, whoever's in charge of it still, and they will announce that they are going to import this archive. They actually have a webpage that tells you all of the different works that they're currently importing and all of the ones that they've already done. So you can just sort of bop through if you want to see what kind of things that they're going after. And what they do is a whole bunch of volunteers will start importing all of those works and converting them in so that they appear as intended on AO3. Now, anyone who's familiar with AO3 knows that there are old school authors, big name authors, who have already done this sort of thing with their own works. That they have already taken their works off of whatever site that it originally was on, and they put it on AO3 or they cross-posted. So in addition to all of this big overarching like mass move, AO3 also, the Open Doors project will send out an email or whatever, however they can, to contact all of the authors on the site to ask permission and give them the option to sort of say, hey, I already put this work on the site, so you don't need to move that one. Or just to simply say, I don't want you to move them at all. I want it to fade away. Anyway, so after they've gotten whatever permissions they need and they've got all their volunteers, they move everything and they move it into its own collection. So it's a little bit complicated because they are obviously attached to the authors that are on AO3 if those authors contacted the AO3, but if they're not, they're just sort of attached to the collection. So you have to look for the original archive that they came from in order to find it. It's a little funky, but pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so cool to have a space online to not only make sure that the history of our culture, basically online culture, is safe, but that also many people can access it in the future. And it's almost like they're leaving doors open for people to find things. It's a great name now that I think
Mhm.
about it, but yeah, it's preservation of fan culture is important. I don't think that should be a controversial opinion.
It's interesting because a lot of the thing, like the example I used, is these smaller sites that are sort of independent, but honestly, some of their better known projects are things like the GeoCities Rescue Project or the Yahoo Group's Rescue Project, which
Yeah.
both of these were platforms that had huge fan presence on them if you know where to look, but they were owned by these massive corporations outside of the control of the fans. So when they were taken down, the fans didn't they had no choice. They didn't get to they could rescue whatever they could, but they had no other place to put it right off the bat. So
Yeah.
I don't know, it gives the agency back to the hands of the fans in a lot of ways by sticking it on Archive of Our Own.
Yeah, the GeoCities Rescue Project, the Yahoo closed GeoCities in October of 2009. And that was the year that AO3 went live, actually. And then Yahoo Groups was closed in January 2020. So these are examples of mass deletion events that I would say were a lot easier for people to save, basically, to be able to put it on AO3, that kind of thing. The 2002 mass deletion event for LiveJournal, or was that fanfiction.net? I think it was fanfiction.net. That wasn't something people could save. And that is so sad because there are so many fics that happened to be explicit that we will never be able to read again in such a easy way, right? Because somebody probably printed it out and has it in a book, or somebody has it on a thumb drive somewhere in their house, but like it's gone basically from the internet, and that's so sad. And this is a project that the public funds, because the public does fund the Organization of Transformative Works
Mm-hmm.
and AO3, and therefore the Open Doors Project. The public, us, and anybody who's listening, gains access to all of this stuff because we give money to an organization that does this for us. It's almost like we've created our own government. And it's great. I really love it. I have personally donated to AO3 when they're doing their drives, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I feel fantastic when I do that, because I want to support a group of people who volunteer to make sure that we won't have another LiveJournal Russia bullshit situation happen
Mm-hmm.
again. Okay? We're not going to let anybody else decide what happens to our culture as fandom people. And I think that that is so cathartic in a way for people who had to deal with all of that stuff from LiveJournal and fanfiction.net. But also, it gives us so much power. We, as a group of people, get to decide what happens to the things that we make and the things that we read and the things that we enjoy. And that never happens in other pieces of media. I think that's also probably the reason why everybody in fanfiction loves Death of the Author, partly because we decide what happens to these characters and how we decide to interpret things. But I digress. It's the Open Doors Project is a good thing.
So do you want to know why it is not
Contentious.
uncontroversial? So the inherent problem, I guess you could go with this project, is that despite best efforts to sort of give control to the authors in terms of whether they want their works to be archived or not, there is a lot of discourse that surrounds the idea that there are authors who create these works with the knowledge that they are ephemeral, that they are going to go away, and they don't like the idea that somebody's going to sort of reach out and preserve it whether they want to or not. This is especially true in fandoms where either perhaps the author was very young and they're like, oh wow, I don't want anybody to see that, I'm not particularly proud of that work. Or in fandoms where maybe they were really proud of that work, but there was a whole lot of other things that were going on in the fandom at the time, and they're like, look, I want it taken down because it was part of this whole big XYZ in the fandom at the time, and it brings up a lot of bad memories, or I'm afraid that it's gonna stir that back up, so I want it gone. So there's the controversy surrounds the idea that the sort of limited lifespan of fic is sort of its natural life cycle, and trying to change that and preserve it and archive it is not necessarily what everybody wants, and that because it's a big project going in and sort of doing the whole archive in a sweep, it removes a certain level of autonomy from the creators, which, again, Open Doors does put it in a very serious good faith effort into letting creators opt out. But I mean, if it's an old site and you don't use that email anymore as a contact email, or you've forgotten your password, or you have no good way of contacting them, but you're like, hey, I want to put in my 2 cents, it becomes really thorny. Like, what do you do then?
Well, I saw on their site that there's a way to get something off if you can say that this is mine. But it's a little bit of a conundrum because there are obviously orphan websites and orphan fics, right? Which is what we want to preserve with this project. But when somebody comes in saying, hey, I don't like this, and they're claiming that it's them, how in the heck can we make sure that that's who they actually are? I think if they do have some type of evidence to support their claim and they want it taken off, obviously they should. Because consent is important. In every situation in life, consent is important. But if they can't, I don't know. That's like a weird gray area, and I wonder if they have to deal with that a whole lot.
Yeah, because I feel like it's discourse that has popped up recently in fan culture, and I'm going to put that in quotes because by recently I mean essentially in the last 10 to 15 years of internet fandom specifically, because in initial hard copy paper yield style Trekkie fandom, like, it was hard enough to get out zines that I almost feel like at the end of the day they were like, look, we went to all the trouble of publishing the thing. If somebody takes it and makes an archive out of it in their garage, well, isn't that kind of what we wanted? We put all the effort into making it exist, right?
Yeah, it's not like there are pickets at the University of Iowa, which has a fan culture preservation project that they're doing with Organization of Transformative Works. They have all of the physical, like non-digital forms of fan culture, basically.
Yeah.
Fanzines and pieces of media, like art and all that
Mm-hmm.
jazz. They have it there. Nobody's going in and being like, hey, I don't want you to have this anymore. It's like part of their collection now.
Yeah, in
So,
all of its rough and ready glory.
yeah,
And in early internet culture, and I was not there as much, so this is an opinion,
we're
legal
youngins.
research,
We're not
but
40.
a lot of the zeitgeist that I picked up is that it was already hard enough with this incredibly decentralized fan system where everybody was off in their own little corner doing their own little thing, and you already kind of had to know someone who knew someone to figure out where to go to get the fic in the first place,
Wow.
or even that your internet connection was spotty or was dial up. So you're like, well, I was going
Oh
to
my
print
god.
off the fics anyway, or like if I wasn't on the mailing list, it was never going to be in my inbox. So the fact that I got it is great. It wasn't so much like any way of preserving it to hand it around was still thought of as better than losing it. So, like, and the idea of taking it down was sort of like we already put so much effort into getting it circulated.
It's true. I mean, it's so much easier to circulate something online. That's the
Mm-hmm.
reason why the internet exists, to circulate information more easily, right?
I mean, can you even imagine these days, like, being like, okay, I want to read fic, but in order to do it in this fandom, I have to contact this moderator to get on the email list so that they'll
Oh
send out
no.
links to everybody's individual sites for the week. Or like
Oh
as a
god.
writer being like, I gotta send in my link to the mod.
That's
Like,
fanzines. That
I
was
know, but it was
fanzines
like
too.
in a mailing list styles,
Yeah.
like crazy.
I guess I'll just have to reread that one fic that I have over and over and over and over again.
That is, to my understanding, what a lot of people did is they would print out the ones they really liked and they would read it 7 or 8 or 9 times, whether or not it was finished.
I saw this amazing Tumblr post that somebody 15 years ago had this fic that they personally printed and bound for themselves. And
Hmm.
now it's completely gone. Nobody can find it anywhere except for this person's physical copy of it.
Well, presumably.
Of course, it could be other people could have done the same thing, but like as far as they know, they are the only person that still has a copy of it besides probably the author. And it's just amazing to me that happened, but also that now we have a way to for that to not happen unless the
Hmm.
author didn't want AO3 didn't want OTW to have it.
I've talked about it before, but one of the things that I love about AO3 is the ability to download ebooks of all of these fic
Mm.
for that very reason, because even if I am not archiving it to everybody in the whole world, I can ensure that I always have a copy of my favorite fics, that I don't have to worry about being deleted or being lost. And this may be taking it slightly outside the scope of this episode, But you have to ask yourself, if somebody took it down and I have a copy, how private do I keep that information, I guess? Because
Whoa.
I obviously love it and want to keep it, but obviously the author has sort of made their own sort of public statement about the fact that they don't want other people reading it. So I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum at the very least. Like me curating my own private archive as opposed to AO3 creating a large public archive.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they keep the fix that somebody takes down already on AO3,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's almost like the Open Doors Project is giving fic another chance to
Mm-hmm.
exist. And if somebody comes up saying, "Hey, I don't want this anymore," and they can indicate that they are the author or somehow have claim to it, then that's fine. But it's another chance, especially
Mm-hmm.
those fics that are orphans. Like, I just feel it's much better to have the take everything we can policy and then,
Mm-hmm.
make it go away if we need to, than the other way around. I don't want to lose culture. this
And
is this is part of our culture as human beings, in my opinion.
as depressing as it is, a lot of people leave fandom
Yeah.
wholesale, like never to return.
Yeah.
And all of the work that they put into it just sort of drifting away into the internet as sites break down and updates break things. And it's just a little bit tragic, the idea that somebody went to all the trouble of building this lovely little thing and then it just sort of goes away. And the
I
fact that
mean,
you'd never get a chance to experience it.
is there a way? I'm thinking of the Wayback Machine,
Mm-hmm.
the website that makes sure that it takes basically like photos, or it takes time, a piece of time where a
Mm-hmm.
website is, and you can look at a certain website at a specific time. Like, you can go back and look at Google when it
Mm-hmm.
was like originally a thing, right? Because it's called the Wayback Machine, and it does this. You can't petition the Wayback Machine to make something go away, right? I
I
don't know
don't
for sure, but
think so. But the downside of the Wayback Machine is that it is not an archive in the same way
no,
because you already have to know it existed and where to have found it,
that's true. That is true.
which is not helpful a lot of the time. I speak from experience. Whereas AO3 is like is essentially making it continue to exist so you can still find it without having previously known about it.
Yeah, they're kind of different beasts, but they are both archives in certain ways.
And they're both useful in certain ways. Having said that, I will put in, I guess, my 2 cents here, which is no matter how you personally feel about it, I feel like it's important to at least spare a thought when you are using something like the Wayback Machine to find a fic to what the author would have wanted. At least have that in the back of your mind while you're doing it.
Well, we have talked a lot about our opinions about all of this. We would love to know your opinions if you have any.
Mm-hmm.
Email us at mmbpresents@gmail.com. And it's time for Rec Corner!
So, my rec this week, in the spirit of what we're talking about,
The
is
only
called,
rec. I don't have a rec because this is all B right now.
this rec is called Your Cowboy Days Are Over by M. And again, in the spirit of this one, there is no link for this because it has been taken, the site itself is gone. You can't read it anymore, which you're thinking, well, why in heaven's name would you rec something that you can't read anymore? To make a point, friends. No, this fic was taken down way before I got my hands on it. It is not, to my knowledge, part of the Open Doors project. I have done research. I cannot find a copy of it, but there still exists in the audio fic archive an absolutely stunning pod fic of this work by General Ginger. It is a lovely, lovely, amazing, complete story from the Stargate Atlantis fandom. It's mostly Jen. It's sweeping, and I cannot express to you how much I love this story. It's about John Shepard, and he, through some circumstances, has ended up on this other planet where he has to sell his memories to survive. And he gets caught up in some political intrigue, and there's a lot of other heavy emotional things going on. But it's this really beautiful story that I never would have been introduced to at all, ever, in any form, if there was not that one piece still hanging around the internet that I could grasp onto to find it. And I felt like that was fairly appropriate when we're talking about archiving things, because this story could have been lost.
That is a sad thing to have something like that go away when seemingly the author doesn't want it to go away. It's just orphaned. Will we have that in the show notes?
Yeah, I will give you a link to the audio fic archive post.
Gotcha. Well, good. If you guys are interested, you should listen to it. I think we have talked all we can about the Open Doors project. We will get into this probably in the future again, but
yep.
It's interesting stuff. Thank you for sticking around and listening.
I guess we'll see y'all next week
On Fangirls Anonymous. Bye!